Welcome to Glioblastoma AKA GBM, a podcast brought to you by the Glioblastoma Research Organization, highlighting stories of GBM warriors, caregivers, medical advisors, and more. Welcome to Season 3 of our podcast, where we delve deep into the world of glioblastoma, also known as GBM. Join us as we navigate the complexities of glioblastoma with expert insights and heartfelt narratives. Please remember that the information presented in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended to treat, diagnose, or prevent any disease, and you should contact your medical provider or healthcare team with any questions. Mike Posner, welcome to the Glioblastoma AKA GBM Podcast. I'm so excited to sit down with you and learn more about you and chat about your family's experience with brain cancer. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So kicking it off, I guess going back first things first, when you were a kid, were you always into music? Like, what was your childhood like? And were your parents, especially your father, like super supportive of that? And how did that play a role into what you were doing?
Yeah, absolutely. People often ask me how I got into music, and I say I didn't get into music. Music got into me. So my mom tells me a story of me being 2 or 3 years old, and she said, yeah, I took you in the backyard and the bird was chirping and you were trying to sing the notes back to the bird. So I think it just kind of came with my body this time around. My parents were incredibly supportive of me. They got me music lessons against probably their better judgment. They even got me a drum kit when I was, I think, 10. So I was making a lot of noise. Probably most significantly, when I got into hip-hop music, I started rapping around 8 years old and then making my own beats around 12 and 13. They were also quite supportive of that, even though they really did not understand it. They would, like drive me to the hood and to the studio, and they were just really supportive, even though they didn't get the music yet, because my music wasn't very good yet. I was new and figuring it out. They were still really supportive.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so you went to college at Duke,
Mm-hmm.
and you were making beats and you were making tracks in your dorm room. And then what was the progression of that to launching your first album and becoming who you are today?
I was just making songs, and I would put them out on MySpace, and I would wait until the other kids go party, basically, because that's when it was quiet. That's when I could record my vocals. And so one day I remember my friend Xander came back from some party, and he said, they played your song at the party and everyone knew the words.
Really?
I said, what? At this point, I've already been making music 12 years. I'm 20 years old. That never happened before. And it just started to spread, through word of mouth, basically.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I guess fast forward, continuing that, how was the progression of making music in your dorm room to then signing with the label and actually your first album and Cooler Me becoming a huge hit? What did that look like?
It really just started because the music started to catch on its own. And so record labels don't particularly care about artists until other people do. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I started to have build a fan base, and I would go to other colleges and play little shows and everyone would know the words. It was just kind of surreal. It was just spreading word of mouth, and then record labels started to become interested. Before I finished college, I signed a record deal with J Records.
That's so cool.
It was cool.
I can't even imagine being a college student, and then all of a sudden you're with a record label and you're doing, I guess, what you've dreamed of. What did you actually study at Duke?
My major was sociology.
Interesting.
Which I honestly picked because it was easy. It was one of the easier majors. Okay. And I was putting a lot of time into music. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you ever think of a career in sociology if music didn't happen, or was it always
No.
music is it?
Yeah, I say if you got a plan B, then you don't believe in your plan A enough.
Okay. That's totally valid. And then so I guess fast forward a couple years to 2015, your song "I Took a Pill in Ibiza" blew up. But also around that time, that's when your dad was diagnosed with a brain tumor. What was that like?
Yeah, so this is maybe 10 years. We're flash cutting 10 years later. And life is rigged in a way that it will continue to invite you to grow no matter what. And so I was at a real high point in my career, actually the highest point in my career thus far. My song that you mentioned, I Took a Pill and Ibiza, was the #1 song in America. I was parading around the world, ripping my shirt off at shows, and people were chanting my name. And I remember sitting in this like $1 million home in the Hollywood Hills, and it belonged to me. And I felt like I made it. And I also felt a little bit of this is going to last forever-ness wash over my consciousness and sort of become omnipresent in my psyche. I was sitting in this home and my phone rang, and like a Pavlovian dog, I went to go retrieve the phone, and it wasn't my manager, it wasn't my agent, it wasn't one of my Hollywood friends. It was my mom. And she said, Dad has a tumor in his head the size of a tangerine, and they're going to take it out tomorrow. You need to come home. And so I went home. And I was simultaneously high and low at the same time for that year, where my career was skyrocketing and my father was dying.
How did you handle that?
I handled it as best I could, mostly by serving him. So my sister and I became a really good team, and we would take turns. You know, she'd do her job, I would take care of Dad, and then I would do my job, and she would take care of Dad. And then I went from living in this home to like moving back to the room that I grew up in, and putting my designer clothes in the dresser that still had the stickers on it from when I was a little kid, with the Ninja Turtle stickers. So it was just completely surreal, but mostly I filled up my time with taking care of him, like making sure he was good. And there was a lot to be done. As you know, we needed equipment. Like he would fall out of the bed. So we had to get a hospital bed. And if we needed to get a chair he could sit in and a lift to get him out of the chair. And we were blessed to be able to hire help to help look after him too. So all that kind of stuff. And then I also sort of kicked into high gear creatively. So I had my little studio set up, and I put all that gear in the basement. It was the same basement where I first started making music. And so my dad was now in our family room because he couldn't go upstairs anymore. And so that became like his room, and there was just this flight of stairs leading to a subterranean dungeon, which was when I wasn't looking after him, I was down there making an album, and I would just create. And actually was an incredibly creative time, I think, because I probably subconsciously knew if I sat still too long, I would probably be overcome by the pain of it all.
Do you think that your dad inspired you to make more music during that time? Or was he able to be present, and were you showing him what you were making down in the basement? What was his involvement?
Not so much. He was really confused. Mm-hmm. So every day was different, but often he didn't know where he was. I'm really thankful he always knew who I was and who my mom was, and he didn't, he was able to remember us. But his short-term memory was pretty much non-existent. So if something happened the day before, he didn't remember that. And we had a nurse that would look after him, a couple, Alfreda and Bree. They were incredible. And they would come every day. And every day they'd walk in, he'd say, "Mike, who is that?" And they were with him all day. So he just couldn't. And then, but then I remember someone would walk in that he went to third grade with, and he'd go, "Mark, how are you?" And so, it was just, he had brain surgery, he had a tumor taken out of his brain. We also have a lot of dementia in our family as well. So he wasn't, giving me notes on music. But I didn't show him any of that stuff I was making. But I would often, in sort of a cosmic game of musical chairs, find myself doing things for him that I suspect he did for me when I was a baby, like changing his diaper, like singing him songs as he went to sleep, so our musical connection, I'd bust the guitar out and, play him to bed pretty much.
Do you feel like, back then, like when you were in the public eye and you were back home dealing with your dad who was going through a very devastating diagnosis, like what did that look like for you? Were you still doing public things? Like, were you talking to people publicly about it? Like, I think when people are going through it, it's very hard to, it's easy to remove yourself and you kind of just don't share what's going on. But did you find that, did you want to talk about it? Did you have friends that you relied on? What was the, I guess, external facing communication for that?
I remember it just started taking up most of our bandwidth as a family to just take care of him. So I'm sure that my closest friends all knew what was going on, but I don't know that I was really given moment to moment updates with people. I was just thinking about him. It was I was really in some way, one of the roles I played was secretary. I have an assistant now, amazing one, and she runs my calendar. I was running his calendar, and so everyone knew, his friends knew he was dying. They all wanted to see him. And I had to decide, if he was up for it or not, or if he was too tired. And because he was a very gregarious and loving human. So it was people just wanted to come in our house all the time. And we didn't want people always busting in our house. So, it was just handling who could see him and when and for how long and that kind of stuff. And so it was more about him than me at that point.
Was that hard for you? I know for me, I had to make some pretty significant decisions about my dad's life, and it's hard. I was 21 and having to make certain decisions for your parent, which you're used to, the parent making decisions. It's not the easiest thing. How did you feel about that?
I don't remember feeling that much of anything. I think I calloused over a lot of my emotions just to make sure I could just show up and get what needed to be done. I was the man of the house at that point, so I needed someone had to carry the ball down the field. So I was focused on that, and I think my emotions really caught up to me. Really, actually, months and months after he passed away. Do
you feel like when you were making music in the basement, that was kind of your way of coping with everything, or was it just a distraction?
I'm not sure I would describe it as either of those things, a distraction or coping. I would say it's a beautiful place to put energy in, and some really strong emotions. I hope a lot more than a distraction or coping. I hope it's a transmutation of pain into beauty that can make a difference for other people when they hear it. So I hope it was that. Yeah.
When you talk about your emotions catching up to you months after he passed away, what did that look like?
I just remember at his funeral, everyone was hugging me and they kept crying on my shoulder. And I'm like, what? I was smiling. And here's this beautiful celebration of my dad's life. And I couldn't get why everyone was crying. And I remember at the end of that day, taking off my dress suit and dress shirt, and it smelled like 10 million different perfumes from everyone crying on me. And I just went directly into work, and I think that was a distraction for sure. I had a bunch of offers to do shows, and I just said yes to all of them and started doing them. And it wasn't really till I remember 8 months later, I was with my mom and she was checking her voicemail on her cell phone, and she accidentally played an old message, and it was my father's voice. And he was saying how much he loved her. And I just wept until I was a puddle on the floor. Guys are a little slower sometimes. It took me 8 months.
Some people take years. I feel like it's so different with everyone. And I think, especially with the nonprofit, just learning about grief at a different level. Like it's every single person, it's not linear, and every single person deals with it in their own ways. I know you also like, I was like reading online is like you wrote an entire poetry album. Like you did so much in the time of that, like right after his passing. Like that's
I forgot about that.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Do you think that was a place in your life that you were maybe the most creative, or do you not like attribute that?
I mean, it's definitely a high point creatively, the output that was coming out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I forgot there was a whole other project I made in addition to that other album. But I wouldn't, I mean, I've had other periods of extreme output. Yeah.
What's like your favorite?
I'm in kind of a good one now.
Okay.
Yeah, so this one's pretty good. And I like working in immersions. So I like my life to be sort of like unbalanced in the short term and balanced over like the course of the quarter or the course of the year. Okay. So I might take a few weeks or a month and rent some place and set up the gear there and just make music and go really hard. And by the end, you're like dead. Everyone's like, we have to get out of here, like borderline sick. And so I like to work in deep immersions like that and kind of come out. So I'm blessed to have a number of those in my life, and there's nothing better than it, man. You're not thinking about anything other than the art. You're not thinking about sex or money or eating. It's just like
full work mode.
Yeah, and but it doesn't feel like work. It's like it feels like this is what I'm on earth
create
to do.
mode, right?
Yeah, this is like my purpose.
Do you think that when you were like climbing Mount Everest or like walking across the United States, were these like immersion periods?
Those are definitely immersions.
That's also, it's incredible. Congratulations.
Thank you.
First of all, walking across the United States, insane. But also summiting Mount Everest is incredible. Like seriously, that is so cool.
Thank you.
First of all, like, we're not very high altitude right now. We were driving up and I was like, oh my God, we're driving up a mountain. And I was like, this is maybe what, a 16th of that? Like not even. So that's good.
Yeah, way less than a 16th, I think. Those were immersive, in the obvious ways, but they were such long projects. The walk was 6 months and 3 days. Everest, to go from never climbing to the summit and down was 18 months.
Was that the first mountain you summited?
No, God,
okay,
no.
I was like, you said never climbing. I was like, wait, hold on.
So I didn't explain it like clearly. To climb Everest, that expedition was 2 months, but to belong there, I had to train for over a year full time because I didn't want to just climb Everest. I wanted to belong on Everest.
Okay.
So, yeah, I climbed. Before Everest, I climbed 71 mountains in 18 months or 16 months, and then spent 2 months there.
What sparked this like desire to want to summit mountains?
It was really like one project combined with the walk. So while I was walking across America, I got bit by a rattlesnake, almost lost my foot, and went home. Everyone expected me to quit because that's what a logical person would do. But I didn't. And I went back to the spot that the snake bit me, and I kept walking, and I walked 1,000 more miles.
Wow.
And over the course of those 1,000 miles, that's when I started to not just dream about Everest, but kind of plan for it. And so I believe that dreams either blossom into plans or they wither into regret, one or the other. Mm-hmm. So that one started to blossom into a plan. And when I finished the walk, I dove in the Pacific Ocean, and it felt like the first day of my life in some ways. I spent a few days kind of just reflecting, and I didn't unpack my bags. I didn't really have a home to go back to. I just started climbing 2 weeks later.
That's wild.
And so it's just kind of like one project.
So on this like reflection, what did you learn about yourself? Like what were
a lot.
I'm sure it's a ton, but like I guess biggest takeaways, what were you I guess like most proud of, or what do you feel like you're like, I did this, like, or this is how I'm going to live my life moving forward? Like what changed?
I uncovered a embryonic dormant fire inside myself that I had no idea was there. I had an inkling that there was more inside me, that perhaps I was tougher than I thought I was. Perhaps there was more of me than was encompassed inside my social personality. So when I say social personality, I don't mean just my public-facing personality, but just who I had decided I was. I was 29 years old, and all of my sort of ideas about who I was as a man and who I wasn't as a man were starting to become pretty calcified. And there was more outside of that calcification. I set about this journey in order to test that hypothesis. And what I found was there wasn't a little bit more, it was a lot more. You know, like I learned I was capable of pretty much anything. And I believe all of us are. Mm-hmm. So I don't mean to say that in an ego-y way, but I found a lot of confidence in myself. Mm-hmm. And no one will really understand, except for the other people that have done it, how bad it hurt, how easy it was to quit, how many reasons there were to quit, how close death was, and to face all that stuff and decide every day, you know, I'm going to keep going anyways, comes a pride that is just indisputable in my heart, and no one can take it from me, and no one can even see it but me. But it's a reward that I wouldn't trade for the world.
What do you think your dad would say if he saw from what you've spoken about, is that at least I think a couple weeks ago you posted about how all of the lyrics in I Took a Pill in Ibiza, and how you're 180 and you wrote different excerpts
they're
of
not true
the
anymore.
Difference. So how do you feel what would your dad say about the different person you are today?
He would be proud. I mean, my dad, it was hard to get him to, he was a human teddy bear. Mm-hmm. He was more like a traditional mom is thought of, and my mom was more like a traditional dad is thought of. And that's not quite fair. My mom is very, very loving as well. But he really was a teddy bear. Pretty much every other sentence that came out of his mouth was how proud he was of me, but then also my friends. If he met you, he would be talking about how proud he was of you. Even, I don't know, he used that word a lot, proud. And I mean, I know for sure he would be proud of the man I've become. Mm-hmm. And I feel his presence often as well.
Are you, I guess that's my next question, how do you feel like you still connect with your dad in any way? And the things that you do you still do them to honor him? I guess what is his relevance, or how prevalent is he in your life now that he's not here anymore?
That's a beautiful question, Amber. Well, one, putting the spiritual side of things aside, and we can go back to that, but just on a sort of nuts and bolts standpoint, I'm made out of my dad. Mm-hmm. You know, and I look like that motherfucker. You know, if you get a picture of him when he's 36, it's we're twins, you know. And when I go home, aunts and uncles, they call me Johnny all the time because I remind them so much of him when he was my age, the age I am now. So I carry his genes, I carry his DNA, I carry his smile, I carry his features, I carry some of his idiosyncrasies, I carry some of his neuroses, I carry some of his laughter, I carry some of his smile, I carry some of how he saw the world, and I carry his memory. So, I knew my father so well, I can pretty much fill in the blanks on what he would be saying and reacting and doing if he were in the room right now. Mm-hmm. So in that way, he's a part of me. And, then going back to the spiritual side, it is when I quiet my mind, I'm a meditator. So when I have sort of deep meditative sessions or sometimes breath work, I'm a breath work teacher and practitioner. I think I can invite his energy in and ask him for advice, and we can visit. The last thing I'll add is when I was walking across America, that journey was, as I mentioned, 6 months and 3 days. Pretty much every night he was in my dreams.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. That's crazy. My dad passed away 6 years ago in like a month, and I've had one dream about him. It's wild. I'm just like, I remember the first time it happened, I woke up and I was like sobbing, and I was like, come back, wait. Next day, I was like, I can't wait to go to bed. I was like 9 o'clock, lights out. I was like, let's go. And I was like, damn, this guy. I was like, just come back, man. Just say hi.
What happened in the dream?
It was in the building my mom and I were living in at the time, and she was looking for a new apartment. And we walk into the elevator. My dad's just in the corner of the elevator holding like papers, like a clipboard kind of thing. And I just saw him and gave him the biggest hug. And I woke up and I was like, what's going on? Crazy. It was like so real. I was like, come back, just say hi.
Yeah.
But yeah, death is weird. Do you think your perception of like life and death has changed since your dad?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is a real gift. We talked a lot about the grief and the sadness and avoiding it and not avoiding it. And grief is challenging and not fun at times. And like you said so wisely, not linear. It's what a lot of people don't realize. So it's really cool that you're helping people understand that. But it also can be a tremendous gift, because it's one of the death and grief, the combo of the two, are one of the most clarifying things in the human experience. We live in a society that, as you know, often hides death. We're obsessed with staying young and looking young, and I'm guilty of all those things, right? And often just living as if we're never going to die. That's a very dangerous way to live, because often we die without ever having lived. So when death comes close, either from one having a near-death experience or from a loved one having a death experience, which is a near-death experience as well, in a different way, what happens is your own life comes into real focus. When you're in that hospital and your father's just come out of operation, getting a brain tumor taken out, you're not worried about your bank account. You're not worried about your career. I can remember him being in the ICU, and there's a family next to me, in the room next to his. I don't know what was going on with their loved one, but I know it was serious. And I can remember just hugging strangers and how beautiful that was, because of the proximity of death, which put us in proximity with life. So I'm using a lot of words, but really what Dad's death taught me was, I'm going to fucking die. I'm going to die. So I might want to consider living my life, like stop obsessively worrying about what other people think about me and optimizing for getting liked by the most amount of people. And maybe I should try to live in a way that I'd be proud of, in a way that is exciting, in a way that's inspiring to me. And the time to start doing that is right fucking now.
Do you feel like the life you're living now is in line with the ideal vision that you have for yourself and the person that you want to be? Like, do you feel like you're on that track of being like the epitome of Mike Posner?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely not perfect, but I know what my purpose is for at least this chapter of my life. And I work every day to live inside that purpose. And that's what gives like life its juice. And have you read Man's Search for Meaning?
No.
You'd love it.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Have you heard of it?
No.
So it's a book by a psychologist named Viktor Frankl in the 40s, and he's Jewish, and he was a Jewish renowned psychologist, and he lived in, I think, Austria, I want to say. Don't quote me on that. And the Nazis start to take over. And he has opportunity to, because he's so accomplished, he has opportunity to be extradited to U.S. He turns it down because he says, I'm not going to leave my parents and my wife. And he goes to Auschwitz, and he has a book a manuscript that he's working on in his pocket. And of course, that's taken from him. All his clothes are taken from him. His family's taken from him. He never sees them again.
Wow.
He is starved. He is frostbitten. He is put through basically like the worst things that, we could conjure up in our imagination. He finds that because he had a sense of purpose, which was his love of his wife, and this manuscript that was taken, he goes, I need to survive to finish that. He found moments and periods of immense joy in the worst possible human condition, and he survived, where most people didn't. So all that to say, a purpose which is highly individual, like a pair of jeans or a pair of sunglasses, might look good on me, but might go look good on you, or vice versa, is paramount to living a full life. And there are definitely periods in my life where I didn't take the time to figure out what my purpose was, and life gave me some pretty strong feedback that I should do so in the form of pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always, it's interesting. You've suffered a lot of hardship through family. Of course, it's incredibly challenging to lose a father, but you radiate like such positive energy and positive feedback and like just outlook on life. And it's really inspiring to see that. And I think a lot of people that might be watching this as well that have lost a parent and can see like the power of purpose and just the difference of prioritizing the way you're living your life. It's really inspiring. So thank you for
Thank you for that reflection. And I'm so touched by the work you're doing. Obviously, like it hits home for me. If we zoom out, we're supposed to lose our parents. We're supposed to lose them.
I always say that like my life didn't start till the day my dad died, which is the worst possible thing. Because I would literally always call him. Like I was 19, 20, and I was like, what do I do with my life? Like I was, just about to graduate college and doing, God knows what. I was traveling, and he'd always be just like, just figure it out. Like you'll figure it out. And then I figured it out, and unfortunately he's not here, but it's really weird how that works.
Yeah. And so you learned a lesson. Well, it sounds like you learned that lesson in part because he wasn't there anymore. And so that was a gift you got. And I think it's just, it's important to note that either we lose our parents or they lose us. It's one or the other. There's no third option. So I think pretty much all of us would choose, okay, we should lose our parents, the more natural. And sometimes the opposite happens, and it's infinitely more tragic, I would presume. And so all you can do with this grief and this sadness, of which I have a lot. I mean, I try to put light out into the world. But I have an immense amount of grief and anger and sadness. You should see when like the boxing coach comes here.
I was just about to ask how you get that out.
Yeah.
Boxing is a really good release.
It's important to get it out.
I've got a solid like 1-2. Like
yeah. I don't dispute that. I don't want to find out. And all you can do with this grief is something beautiful. Like what can you make it into? And it's so beautiful what you're doing. You're helping others. You're using your pain, and you've made something beautiful. Like you've turned a loss into creation. That's powerful. Mm-hmm. That's you taking your hurt, your pain, your grief, your anger, and transmuting that into service. It gives me goosebumps. You're an artist in that way.
Thank you.
And so we can all be artists in that way. And so it's just a question of finding out what that is for each person and how you can be of service to others. Nothing lights you up more than serving others. Mm-hmm. We work super hard on Jason, who's behind the camera, is my head of content, and we like make videos, all stuff, and we don't just measure the like impressions, all that stuff. We measure the depth. I don't want to just know the breadth. I want to know the depth, like we're putting out in the world. And so we track the comments of people say, I was thinking about ending my life, and I saw this thing, and it helped me, and like
that gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, me too. And so this gives meaning to your own pain, your own loss. If you could share your story in an inspiring way, if you can figure out your own way out of the hole that you're in, well, now you can teach others to do the same. I believe God gives teachers pain because you have to learn how to overcome that pain yourself. Then you can teach others.
And speaking of sharing stories and inspiring others, I'd love to wrap up with the best piece of advice that your dad ever gave you.
Oh, man, that's easy.
I know I was going to say it's a loaded question. I'm glad you have an answer. No, it's great. Let's hear it.
That's easy. I used to always say, because it's our company mission, so we talk about it all the time. It came right from my dad. He used to say all the time, Michael, there's 2 H's in life, health and happiness. So all our goal, our mission with our work is to help people be healthier and happier. And that's it. And it came from my pops. The other thing he used to say, he always go, take care of your mother. He'd always do that. He'd walk out of the room and he'd come back in the room and go, take care of your mother.
Well, thank you so much for sharing more about your dad. It was such a pleasure to learn more about him and more about the work you're doing. It is super inspiring. And honestly, so I've been I was a big fan. Middle school, I was like rocking out to Cooler Than Me, took a billion Ibiza, so it is awesome. I was always, we were rocking to it on the car right over here. I was like, we have to hype ourselves up. But it was such a pleasure to meet you, and I really appreciate you sharing more of your story, and I think it'll help a lot of people.
Thank you. God bless you. Whoa, God bless you, and everyone listening, God bless you. Yeah, keep going.
Cool.
Awesome.
That was awesome.
So tell me more about...
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Glioblastoma AKA GBM. To learn more about the Glioblastoma Research Organization, you can visit us online at gbmresearch.org, on Instagram or Facebook at Glioblastoma Research, on Twitter at glioblastoma.org, or on LinkedIn as Glioblastoma Research Organization. To start your own fundraiser, to donate, or to learn how to get more involved with the organization, please email us at contact@gbmresearch.org, and we'll see you on the next episode of Glioblastoma AKA GBM.